Hey, good morning, folks. We are going to continue working on artwork for the Spelljammer Combat and Exploration supplement that we will be publishing on DMsGuild once it is finished. So give me a moment here to check my signal. We'll go through my intro spiel and we'll get at it for about 100 minutes today. For those that are watching this in the future, skip forward maybe 2 minutes and then we'll be into the artwork. So skip forward. It sounds like this is coming along okay. So let's see. We'll mute that out and then we go like that, like there. Beep, beep, beep. Copy, paste. Okay, cool. So, intro here. Hey, my name is Phil Kearney. I create role-playing game supplements. I illustrate them. I publish them online. I've been focusing my attentions on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition here for the past 5 years, and there are a slew of links in the description down below to show you previous works that I have created. They all have extensive free previews, so if you're here for the artwork, there's probably about 150 some odd illustrations that you can thumb through in the previews if you wish. But if you're here for D&D, 5e game design and ideas, then the content I produce is meant for both players and DMs. And I typically run a campaign from level 1 through 20 every 200 to 250-ish hours. So the stuff that I build is meant for the campaigns that I'm building for my own home table, or are things that I anticipate I may need and thought were cool enough to share with other people. So if you think that stuff is cool, consider making a purchase, support the channel and growth of the stream. Let's see here, almost done. You can follow me on Twitter at Phil Kearney if you wish. I always post that I'm live. There you can get notifications. Best way to get notification of when I'm live in the future is like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to always get those notifications. I'm here 6 days a week doing 2 or 3 different projects at a time. Let's see. So we're at currently episode 250, and we created this cover back around episode 15, so you can check out the Spelljammer playlist here on my channel at Phil Kearney to go check out the creation of this if you're interested. So I talk about making games. So we'll have an idea here in 5th edition. It's how to have more in-depth combat mechanics and more mechanics and dice rolling around exploring wild space in the Astral Sea. So we create ideas, we play test them. If they go well, we'll text them out. We'll send them off to an editor who will then send them back to us for us to load into a layout program. Here I am using Microsoft Word. Once all the text here sits on the page nicely, we can, like for instance here on the front page of the exploration, we can then zoom in on here, extract this specific page as a PDF, come over here into Adobe Photoshop, drop in the page here, and then we can begin illustrating. So once all the illustrations are done, we'll extract them all out of Adobe Photoshop, drop them back into Microsoft Word. We'll do all the hyperlinking, and then we'll seal it into a PDF. We'll publish it on DMsGuild like everything else, and like everything else down below, there'll be an extensive preview for you to be able to check out the stuff. So yeah, let's keep on keeping on. Hey Karen, it's good to see you. Let's see. I hinted that maybe I would work on this last night, but instead I decided to work on some of the diagrams that are in this book. The combat chapter has to deal with things like movement during combat, and there's a lot of different, since these ships can move anywhere from 5 feet to 1,000 feet squares per round. There's a lot of maneuverability and stuff that they can do, so we wanted to make sure we were continuing to dedicate some time to those mechanics. So we've got shifting scale with stationary objects to close in for landings or an opening to take off. And then like coming in too hot, it can cause you to wreck. So you have to scale your movement with the target you're trying to land on and the size of your ship so that you aren't crashing, or basically if you move too fast, you fall, right? Like if you're moving, like if a human moves more than 5, like a human If they move less than 500 feet in a round, they're technically not falling yet. They take a d6 for every 10 feet that they fall, and it caps out at 200 feet. But you have to be moving 200 feet to be taking all that damage. Technically, you can fall 10 feet, but that's still going to be at a 500 feet per round, because that's the maximum speed that a creature at the 5-foot scale can fall. So if we have a ship that's coming into land at 1,000 miles per round, and they don't hit the frickin' brakes, they're basically just going to punch in and slam into the side of whatever rock they're trying to land on. So you have to slow your speed down as you try to touch down gently, or you have to perform a high DC piloting check to go from super fast to touch landing. It's like zoop up and you're okay. That would take an incredible piloting check, DC 20 plus. But you could instead just take a round or two extra to come in gently so you can land softly and get off your ship. So you have those different scaling, and then taking off is really easy. You just ramp up and shoot out. But we have to specifically talk about those mechanics, just like you specifically have to spell out how a character can get on and off a horse. It's mechanics that are needed. So this is as far as we got on laying those out last night. We'll need to put in a dotted line here. I'll need to refine this overhead map, and as we zoom in again at the 5-foot scale, I'm going to need to put like build an actual building here so that it registers properly. But this is page 16, and then we finished page 17, which is talking about instead of landing and taking off of something by shifting scale relative to it, you can zoom in and out scale of distance in relation to moving targets. And as long as you're moving in the same direction, that scaling of movement in and out remains the same mechanics. If you're still going, like if an object is stationary, then the mechanics are pretty easy. You're either landing or taking off from it, and when you're moving, that object is relatively stable, and where you're moving is relative to its stable position. But when two objects are moving, like these things can go 100 million miles per day and travel, and when they get close to each other, they don't necessarily have to slow down. They just have to match speed. So shifting scale with a moving target is essentially the act of pacing them while you're still moving, so you can use the same combat mechanics and basically ignore the fact that you're flying 10,000 miles every 6 seconds, because it's just shooting by. But there's so much speed. 10,000 miles is so huge compared to the 500-foot scale that you're navigating to be able to use your ship weapons with each other. You can still effectively fire ballistas and catapults at each other while you're matching speed. So all the physics that you expect work the way that they're supposed to when you're like pursuing ships in atmosphere, or when you're landing and taking off and you're attacking a stationary target. All that stuff works exactly the same way when your speeds match. It's effectively stationary targets, and the movement speed that you use is relative to the target that you're working with, right? So you've got like, here's the 500-foot scale, then you can close in distance here, and then drop once you're adjacent to each other at the 500-foot scale. You then zoom in to the 50-foot scale here, and you can continue closing distance at the 50-foot scale, but you're still moving 100 million miles per day. It's just relative speed. And then there's the difference between, like on the previous page we're looking at stationary objects. This column we're looking at moving targets. But then if you have both stationary and moving targets, then it's a matter of what scale does the stationary target exist. In this case, it's the Citadel of Light from Light of Xeraxis is a stationary object that ships are maneuvering around during combat. The asteroid doesn't move, so all these squares that ships are moving is relative to the stationary object that's dominating the map. But when you zoom in here to, say, adjacent 500-foot squares, those can be picked up here as separate 500-foot squares, each 50-foot, on a 50-foot grid. 50, like the 10 by 10, 50-foot grid is a 500-foot square, which is what we have here. So we can see A is a Star Moth and B is a Hammerhead ship at the 500-foot scale. You can zoom in here at the 50-foot scale, and here's the same Star Moth and Hammerhead ship. But the thing is that while these ships are all maneuvering around, you don't need this 50-foot scale map unless this is as close as you choose. Like you could fly past each other and exchange some fire, or even make an attack at each other. But if this Star Moth is going to continue on to, like, say, this Shrike ship or this Wasp, then you don't need to zoom into this scale to engage the Hammerhead ship in passing. But if you are planning on staying engaged with it, then having them lined up on separate 50-foot scale grids allows you to keep track of what target you're working with. And then on the next page, we haven't built it yet, but then there's pacing. And pacing is when you stay at this relative position with each other on the map, but you're still moving, like here. So if we were to move these two ships this way to the right, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. If the Star Moth is pacing the Hammerhead ship, using a Hammerhead ship can use, like, a ship can use disengage to get away from a ship. A ship can also use pacing as a reaction to stay in pace with a target. So if somebody's trying to move away from you, you can use your reaction to pace them so that you're moving in the same position as they are as you navigate through the 500-foot space or the 1 mile scale or the 10,000 mile scale. But whatever distance you have between the two ships, when you begin pacing, that space is maintained. So you can still have these two 50-foot scale grids adjacent to each other at the 500-foot scale, even though Hammerhead is attempting to run away from you by moving off to the right here. The Star Moth would automatically move to the right with you as well. But I'm in the process of actually building that map on page 18 here to exemplify how that pacing, looks like on a map, right? So you have to build all these tools on top of tools to be able to explain the different ways that ships can interact with each other. Because, of course, if I'm going to fly that way and you want to keep shooting at me, you have to go that way too. And if you keep moving it, like I move 7,000 miles, and then I'm going to catch up with you and move 7,000 miles and catch up with you and then fire again. And then during your turn, you're going to move 7,000 miles out of the way, and then I'm going to... You have that, like, I'm caught up, I lose you. I catch up with you, I lose you. I catch up with you, I lose you. That's basically how 5e combat works in general because of turns. By allowing pacing to be a reaction, you can retain that relative distance to each other, even though the leading target is moving, you're still staying, you pace them as they move. But of course, the target that's pacing, you basically don't move yourself while you're pacing them. You would have to use your reaction every turn to continue pacing them if you take your own action. Like I'm just pacing you, so all my movement is going to the pacing action. I shan't use any of my own movement independently to reposition myself. If I do, I then have to use a reaction when the target attempts to move again to again pace them. And if they use disengage, I can't pace them. I'll then have to use my own action to catch up with again, and then you got distance fall apart like that. Or if you continue scaling up in size, you'll then escape, and then you'll have to pursue, which is its own mechanic. Pursuits, which is a skill check for you to stay within range so that you can attempt to pace them. So there's the pursuit as a skill check to catch up to them, and then when you catch up to them, you can use your reaction to pace them, and you're now locking in with them, and now you can begin making attack actions because you're going to stay within range of their attacks. So if that all makes sense. But that's why there's so many pages to this document, because you don't have to worry about, like, you don't think about pacing and pursuit like that when everyone's just on a horse. You're just running along on a horse. But D&D doesn't specifically spell out anywhere, even on when you're on stagecoaches or horses or dragons, that if you stilt the movement, the only time you're ever going to be able to actually attack each other is when your pursuer catches up to you to exchange fire. And then you can just move away again, or make your attacks and then move away again, and then your turn is over. But by doing this pacing, it allows you to keep that narrative that you're staying in close proximity and chasing after each other. And then we have mechanics here about, like, if I'm pacing, that means I can't use my own movement. So if I'm being paced and I maneuver you into a wall or an object or an asteroid or something, you have to choose to break your pacing so that, because I'm going to shake you off. Otherwise, you're going to ram into that wall and you're going to crash. You see that in Star Wars a lot, like Millennium Falcon dodging through asteroids, and there are TIE fighters chasing after the Millennium Falcon, and occasionally they hit an asteroid. It's because they were pacing the Millennium Falcon, and the Millennium Falcon moved to a position that would cause the TIE fighter to crash, and the TIE fighter didn't make their saving throw to avoid the crash, basically, and then they hit the asteroid. Yum, 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 yum. There you go, and it blows up. So that's why you see those things, why you can have chases through asteroids, because if you lock your target in behind you, and then you can just maneuver that's what we're doing here. We have a rough map here of ships where they're going to end up ramming into asteroids if they maintain their pace. They'll have to break pacing to navigate through that asteroid field differently than your target. And that's how you have that cat and mouse sort of catch up and get away from each other again, until you can get a clearing and you can catch pace with them as you clear out of the asteroids. So asteroids become a very useful function in this game. If you're trying to evade combat, you can lead someone in and try to lure them, like get them off of your back by breaking pace, by having them crash. Anyway, so that's what I'm rambling about today. But that's where I focused my time last night in building out these diagrams to exemplify how all of these different types of mechanics work. And that's the effort that I put on off screen, because a lot of times I have to reword it, and then I build, and then I have to reword it, and then I build, and I reword it. And that's not necessarily a very fun topic for people to watch, especially if I'm expected to be painting. Speaking of painting, maybe I should get to work, eh? So let's just get to work. I could probably be saying all of this while I'm painting, but alas, earwax. Here we are. Let's fill that in like that. Here's a chunk. And here's a chunk. So let's enjoy this meditation here. I'm planning on being back today at lunch. I want to do some more martial powers, and it looks like my Friday lunch is open this week, so I'm going to invest in something that's going to bring me joy, and that joy is coming from Martial Powers Project today. So we're going to work on monks today. We already finished the fighters, the barbarians, the rogues, the rangers, the paladins. I'll go back and look at them again, but as far as I can tell, the only character class that has any kind of straggling left over is the monk. So I'm excited about working on that today. I'll probably work on that some more on Tuesday for Martial Powers for sure. And then I have my Thursday is free next week, so I can come on online and work on something during lunchtime on Thursday. So I'll have Thursday morning Spelljammer, Thursday night Eberron, and Thursday lunch, possibly more Martial Powers. Probably more Martial Powers. I want to get that playtesting up and running as soon as I can after I finish this book, which means I'm going to have to start investing time in creating the playtest campaign where we will be running around and running a game. Best way for you to playtest something. Wait a second. Oh, gasp and begoits. I did not realize I was on the same layer. Well, ain't that obnoxious? Let's blacken that in. That was careless of me not to pay attention. Let's do that over again on a new layer. I need to have a separate layer for the overall black silhouette, and then the textured surface over it. So that was a botch. That's okay. We'll fix it. It seems excessively hot in here today. You know, I bought myself some pizza for the first time in a few months and didn't enjoy it. Did not enjoy it. I don't think I can do pizza anymore. It's just, it just feels too rough on the system. Bop, bop, bop. I am honestly not upset about that at all. My body is slowly pushing me towards higher, less processed to higher quality food overall. And I am very, very happy about that. I certainly enjoyed a lot of garbage food growing up. And I think my body's like, let's take the second half of your life a little easier than the first, shall we? Like, let's stop attempting to destroy ourselves and let's instead build something a little bit more sustainable. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I can get into that. And I can. I can get into that. There, let's do that again. There we go. I know there's a lot of description and a lot of mechanics invested in movement, but it's I think it's just a matter of introducing the concepts. And so far, everything that I've presented to people in general, like they get it, you know, like it makes sense. Maybe it could be worded better, maybe not, but folks get it, and that's all they really need to do is understand how these. Like, you know, you get 5 squares of movement for free, and then you can take the dash action. You use disengage like you expected to. Yeah, there's pacing. Yeah, there's opportunity attacks. And you can't change scale more than once per movement. Like, you got 5 squares of movement, and you can change scale once during that movement, up by 1 magnitude, like from the 50-foot scale to the 500-foot scale. And then from the 500-foot scale to the 1 mile scale, etc. As long as you're only changing magnitude once per move action you're taking, then there's no risk of inertia shock. If you decide to go from like 0 to 10,000 miles per round, that's going to be a piloting DC check 26, which you'll probably fail. And when you fail, it disables your helm for 1 round. It stuns the pilot. And you get scuttled, you'll lose concentration, and you're going to drift for 1 round at whatever speed you were moving prior to getting shocked. And since the helm is disabled during that round, whatever direction you're drifting is, you're locked in that direction unless someone can grapple and tow you to stop you from ramming into something. Nothing's going to stop you from ramming into something. Which is why you don't want to come in hot at, like, you know, what is it? If it's 10,000 miles per round, it's 100,000 miles per minute. It's like 6 million miles per hour. If you're coming in 6 million miles per hour and then you have a system shock, you're not going to land. You're going to be a puddle on the side of whatever it is you're attempting to hot dog land on real quick. And instead, spin the round and slow down so you don't, you know, like you'll have to scale down from 10,000 miles per round to 1,000 miles per round to 100 miles to 10 miles to 1 mile to the 500-foot scale to the 50-foot scale to the 5-foot scale where you can safely stop. Like that's the seven degrees of magnitude that ship movement has from 100 million miles per day to 5 feet, you know, to moving at the 5-foot scale. Like there's 7 magnitudes of scale that you process through. And so that means it technically takes 3 rounds. It could take 7 rounds for you to land if you're doing other stuff. But if all you're doing as a pilot is using your pilot action and like your interaction and your standard action to dash, as it were. You can move twice, which means you can change scale twice. Which means that if you need to change scale a total of 7 times from full speed to parked, it's going to take you 4 rounds of action plus object interaction. So it takes about, what is that, 3.5 rounds, 4 rounds. It takes about 30 seconds for you to slow your momentum down so you can safely touch down without taking damage. But if you're taking off, since your initial movement speed is 0, if you attempt to ramp up speed, you won't hurt yourself. At most, you're going to lose a round of combat because you're stalling your ship out, because you're trying to jump from parked to 10,000 miles per round. You probably don't need to do that if you're in combat. And if you're not in combat, timing doesn't matter. So the only time that you even have to worry about this is if you're trying to land or take off in the middle of combat. If you're just casually taking off, then there is no shock you have to worry about, because you'll have the 20 seconds that you need the 24 seconds that you need to safely land your ship. But again, you can just make a piloting check to try to ramp up and, go from, like, Battlestar Galactica style, go from 0 to 1,000,000 miles per hour and launch off of your carrier ship at, warp speed. You can do that, and if you fail your roll, at worst, it's just going to delay you around while you're still sitting in the launch bay waiting for the system shock to wear off for you to try another skill check to take off again. And as soon as you succeed, you take off like a shot. And that can be narrated as the whoever's coordinating taking off, like if it's actually a carrier ship with loading and squadrons of ships taking off, then you could actually have a flight deck commander that's issuing the command to take off. That if the check fails, it's the commander that's making the check, since they're the one that's commanding the squadron that's taking off. And in that instance, you can just narrate it as the grid is full. We're waiting for a flight pattern to open up for the ships to take off. There'll be a few seconds delay. And as soon as you can hit the check at the speed that you want, then you're clear for takeoff. And then you launch, and then go do what you want to do. But that's a way to narrate it. One way to narrate that. And that's where pacing came from, because being able to dart, and like a high rank pilot can dart in and out of combat by changing scale of movement, like slowing down to the 500-foot scale, pop, 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 and then take off at 1,000 miles per round. Like you can drop in, pop, 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 and then yeet out again, like a UAF, right? That the U.S. military has been dealing with overseas. You can do that same level of maneuverability, but if you're pacing, then if they try to yeet off like that, you can catch and stay up with them, so they can't just gun and run. You're going to run with them, if that makes sense. So, hey, Shiner. We're talking about ship movement mechanics at these vast scales, since it's a critical component. Like at the 500-foot scale, like while you're within a mile, all this stuff works as easily as you would expect 5-foot scale combat, or I guess even easier than, like, say, Salt Marsh. Like Salt Marsh adds complexity to the game without actually increasing the fun of naval combat, which is what was my motivation to building this thing in the first place. But there's so much mechanics that go, like the way that Wizards presents it. It's that when you're flying at 100 million miles per day, and when you are within a mile of something large enough to interact with, like a floating person or a ship or some random trash off the bow, if the DM wants you to interact with it, then you slow down to a speed of basically 40 feet per round, like the normal, like the speed of a horse. And then you interact with these things slowly, and when you create enough, like a mile or more distance between them, then you can speed up again and take off. But that feels like, if you've seen the Harry Potter movie, I think it's the 5th one, maybe it's the 4th one. It's the one with the shrunken head and the bus, and the bus goes super fast, and then when it hits traffic, it just immediately brake checks, like with impossible momentum. That's kind of what that's the flavor that these Spelljammer ships can have but it's like that feels silly to have that kind of like mega stop, mega go action. You know, Harry's getting thrown around in the back of the bus because inertia is a thing. That's where inertia shot came from. And then having a realistic look at, like, you know, it doesn't, people are having, they aren't suspending disbelief with this idea of ramping up and slowing down. What Wizards could have done was explained it in the way that we were doing earlier when we were talking about closing and opening distance with other objects that are moving. When you match speed with them, that movement speed effectively becomes 0, and then your careful movement in close proximity to the target that you're pacing, that becomes like 40 feet per round, right? Well, for us it'd be 25 feet per round because it's 5 foot squares, and you get 5 squares of movement during a round of combat as your object interaction to pilot your ship. You get 5 squares of movement, regardless of the size of movement that you're moving, whether it's a 5 foot scale or 1,000 miles scale. You still get 5 squares. 5 squares. That's right. 5 squares of movement. You get 5 squares of movement as your object interaction, and then you can use your standard action to take the dash action to give yourself another 5 squares of movement, just like D&D 5 foot combat works. But again, it's when you can have that same action economy at any scale, then it becomes an issue. And then you have, and then one of the other things, I closed it already, but the other thing that were on those pages that we were looking at on page 18 was surging. And surging refers to when you are, like, say, on a 50-foot scale map, but you're using movement speed at the 500-foot scale. So each square of movement you move at 500 feet equals 10 squares at the 50-foot scale. That allows you to get a ton of action economy out of those 5 squares on your map. If you have 4 enemies on a map and all of those ships are a cumulative 20 squares apart from each other, if you're going to leapfrog from ship to ship in passing, like doing like if you've got a slashing ram and you want to strafe across all these ships and slash at their helm, at their hulls as you go by, then you can use surging to move at the 500-foot scale. I'm going to move 4 squares this way as 1 square of movement, and then I'm going to hit that target, and then I'm going to use another square of movement to jump over another 7 squares to this next target, because while you're attacking at the 50-foot scale, you're actually moving at the 500-foot scale. So you can have a 500-foot scale map where all these different targets are in space, and you're jumping from ship to ship at that 500-foot scale, while at the 50-foot scale, that's the scale that you have to close in to be able to actually hit something like a Star Moth needs to be within 200 feet of a target to be able to hit it with a melee attack, because that's how melee combat works in 5e. So you have to be able to move from one target to another, and by using the surging, you can upscale your movement so you can close that distance during a normal round of combat. Because if you were just operating at the 500-foot, you can't make melee attacks at the 500-foot scale because you can't hit something 500 feet away with a slashing ram. You have to get within that couple hundred feet. You have to close that distance. So you can fake that narrative distance by visualizing the 50-foot scale map that you're jumping from ship to ship on at the 500-foot scale of movement. You're basically carrying every 500-foot square that you move into. You're basically carrying a 10 by 10 grid of 50-foot squares from square to square, and you're inside of that 50-foot scale grid. And as you move to a new target, you're bringing that target into your grid so you can attack them. And when you're done attacking them, then you can jump out of that square with them, leave them behind, and jump into another 500-foot square at a 10 by 10 grid, drop in, hit that target, and then jump out to go to another target. And you've got, as just a normal movement, you've got 5 of these things that you can do. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm expressing it in text, I tend to ramble a lot more. And then we try to find all the efficiencies of expressing it in print. And so far, all of the diagrams that we've been building have been doing a good job of making the conversation like, you know, a quarter page. So this is what we call a target rich environment. Exactly. And then you can get into dogfighting, because as you're moving from target to target in the battlefield that you're in, if you have fighter ships that start pacing you as you're moving from target to target, you're collecting this train of enemy ships that are matching speed and following your movement as you're weaving through the battlefield, so they can keep attacking you while you're moving around into new targets. If you want to deal with all these guys that are on your back, you can just flip your ship and just coast in the opposite direction, like Battlestar Galactica, the new one. You can flip your ship and be firing at something behind you while you're still moving 10 million miles that way, because of the gyroscopic pivot that you have. You can orient your ship in any direction, as per Spelljammer's Adventures in Space. Like the raw document they provided us says that you can reorient the ship freely during your team's turn, so that all the weapons can be used to attack other targets without your own ship creating cover against that target. Like, I can't shoot you because you're on the other side of the ship. Great. Pilot just rolls the ship over so you can line up your shot and take shots with it, right? So you have that gyroscopic action where you can freely rotate while you're flying, which is reminiscent to the revised, like the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, how maneuverable the Viper fighters were. Like they would use these coasting physics. Like they'd kick off in a direction and then they tilt axis 90 degrees. And while they're still going in this direction, they've got their weapons aimed, aiming at you as they would strafe by. Or they would literally just flip their nose over. So while they're being chased, they would swing their guns around and be firing at the enemy that's chasing them, and they could use navigation jets to change their orientation to dodge fire that's coming in. But if that ship wants to continue attacking you, not only is it taking shots in the nose, but it has to be paying attention to try to stay in target to be able to fire at you. And that's what all these physics are that I've been explaining. And that's what I've been spending. Go back to the beginning of the episode. That's when I was walking through some of the diagrams that I was building off screen, because while I build the diagrams, I'm like, if I build the diagram this way, I can word it this way, and that makes it more efficient. Like I have the original text that might be like maybe 400 characters of text, right? But after building the diagram, I might be able to trim it down to like maybe 250 or 300 words instead. So it becomes more easy to digest the words, and the words are now directly referencing the image of the diagram that we built to express how these mechanics work. And so far, it's working, which will make this the greatest success I've ever created in redefining space physics in the 5e game setting, using the 5e mechanics with just a couple added physics features to help make sure that you're, like, with all these rules, the DM now has a toolkit that you can make your own rulings about, hey, can I interact with this thing? Can I shoot that thing? Can I see that thing? Do I have cover against that thing? What can I do as a player to be creative in this target-rich environment for me to have the fighter, the fighter craft fantasy or the Age of Sail fantasy that I want for my game? You can use these basic physics to break down what it is that the players are attempting to do, or what cool idea the DM has, and now that you have the underlying physics, you can just narrate it. It's like, yeah, this is probably how that would work. You're going to pace it, and then you're going to, so you'll need to use your reaction to pace. Great, I'll use my reaction. Cool, and now that you're doing that, you can surge to catch up to get within melee combat. And as they try to evade, you can then use an opportunity attack to potentially grapple them to prevent them from escaping at all. So that's a reaction, a movement, and a grapple attack. And if you're successful, then you lock onto the ship and it can't escape you, and you can start boarding it if that's what you plan to do. Or you can just dismantle it plank by plank using your ship's melee weapons and just start tearing the ship apart. I guess that's fucking cool. And since your objective is to tear their ship apart, their objective now becomes stop the pilot from tearing my ship apart. Like, you don't have to engage in boarding the ship if you don't want to, But if you are overpowering them ship to ship, the natural pivot is to, well, if you can beat us ship to ship, let's see if you can beat us on deck. And then they're going to attempt to close distance with you and board you so they can get out from underneath those attacks. If they can go storm the deck and get to the bridge, then the pilot won't have the action economy to attack with the ship anymore, because he's going to have to run for his life or get stabbed while he's sitting on a chair. So that's why that boarding, like that assumption about boarding ships, that's why that would exist. But again, there's not enough underlying physics in the Spelljammer box set to have these conversations about why is everyone trying to board each other. From Wizards' perspective, it's because all we have is 5-foot scale combat. And so all we want to do is to simplify and ignore everything that's not 5-foot scale combat, because it's going to take about 400 man hours for us to be able to build the physics needed to be able to have effective 5e combat at the 500-foot scale, because that's about how many hours I've invested in it so far by myself. 500 fucking hours. And I know that Wizards isn't going to do that for a niche box set that is not a bestseller of their selection, that they probably don't ever plan on coming back and doing anything with in the future. So it's a bad investment of their time to dump that much R&D and playtesting into ship movement physics. It's just easier for them just to not bother with it and rely on insane people like me that are willing to invest that time as a hobby for some chump change to be able to develop these things. But it infinitely improves your Spelljammer experience if you just have some of these underlying physics available to you, which is why I'm so excited to have been the one that created this book, because so far I have never seen these physics. Granted, there's a lot of games out there that I don't know, but like Lancer is the most obvious one I think that would have it. Same with Pathfinder, but those seem to both operate just at the 50-foot scale, and that's it. Even Wildjammer is wildly popular, but it operates at the 500-foot scale, and uses Palladium's mega damage. Actually, it's Mage Hand Press's Mass Effect. Is that what it's called? Dark Matter. Their Dark Matter RPG, which is a 5e sci-fi space opera campaign, and its physics are very, very thin. I'm not slighting Wildjammer at all. It is a very simple system that's easy for people to pick up, but it doesn't deal with fightercraft. It doesn't deal with the transition from 5-foot scale to the 500-foot scale. If you're operating at the 500-foot scale, the mega damage that they use aren't meant to engage with like the physics. It has it's a mini game. It switches you out of playing D&D into a 500-foot scale 5e ship simulator, and including like maneuverability classes and like turn radiuses and weapon arcs and a lot of that romantic stuff that comes from the Age of Sail style of 2nd edition, because it was created like 3 years ago. It was the best solution that was out there for Spelljammer, because there were no rules for Spelljammer at all. So I commend them for translating Mage Hand Press's work into something that can be used for Spelljammer. But now that we actually have what the physics of Spelljammer are supposed to be in 5e, that's what allowed me to be able to create this book, because now I know everything that Wizards is thinking about but didn't know how to properly express, so that it would be fun to use, which is a problem that Wizards generally has, is that they'll have a kind of a cool idea, but their execution is poor because they don't have enough manpower and enough playtesting time and development time spent to make sure that the stuff that they're bringing in is well thought out and consistent with their own rules. Like giant, like the Path of the Giant Barbarian, it allows you to be size huge, but they don't give you the reach. It's like, why? Size huge creatures have a 10-foot reach. They didn't want to give that to you. So instead of them figuring out how can our game play properly with a character that can have a 10-foot reach, instead they just said, nah, fuck it, let's just take 10-foot reach away from him. And that just feels bad, because it's like, I'm not actually a huge creature, I just have a bigger hitbox now. So, I mean, your auras are bigger, but a barbarian doesn't have any auras. So like it's a non-bow, as the Magic the Gathering people like to say it. And I'm dogging on Wizards again, but again, like I don't expect them to invest. This is a couture project. I don't expect mainstream Wizards of the Coast to invest this kind of energy into a niche concept. But having it available infinitely improves the Dillard's retail style project that they created. So anyway, that's some of my thoughts behind it. I'm leaning into bagging on. I don't mind punching up at all, especially when people fuck up. And I don't mind being punched up at. God willing, someday I'll be someone would actually punch up at, and I will revel in the opportunity to receive that sort of criticism in the future. But again, if I'm fucking things up, I deserve it, and I need to be able to evaluate the perspective of complaint. Like, why is somebody complaining about this? Is it that the rules don't work, or is the preview I provide for them to review it not generous enough? You know, like offering a free preview to stuff that you have goes a long way to making sure that people that buy it know that they're going to like it before they do. It helps make sure you have good star rating. That's right, John said 5 stars. So it's I think that's actually really crucial for third party. Like I like, who am I? I'm nobody. So I have to prove myself every damn day until I start having a level of success where people speak on my behalf. But I haven't proven myself well enough yet to earn that right, or to have that sort of loyalty from, you know, random people I may not have ever met. But having said that, it means that I just have to keep, you know, doing the work myself, which means that I need to have generous free previews on my work so that people can see this is what we're doing. This is why the money I'm asking you to invest is being well spent. And I think that indie creators that are covetous about their content, fearful that people are going to steal it, hogwash. Does not happen. I've been proven over and over and over again that if people are going to buy your stuff, they're going to buy your stuff, and they're more inclined to do so if you show them what it is that they're buying extensively. Like if you have a 100-page book and you don't want to show the whole 100 pages, you should at least be having at least 50 pages and snippets from each chapter, so that you're not just getting the first 20 pages of the book and God only knows what the back 200 are like. Like you want to create a separate preview file so that people can look at different chunks and pieces of the thing that you're building. So they know, that it's not just front loaded with quality and then just get AI dumped at the back end, which happens. So these are things that I think about. And I don't mind having to prove myself until I have, because once I've proven myself, I've proven myself. And that's where your audience comes from, is that you've applied enough competence over a long enough period of time that you become a reliable source of content that is resonating with the audience tuning in. And that's how you gain audience retention. And again, being able to prove your merit so that people will be willing to get on board with you, which is honestly why I spend more time. Why when I have pickup time, like I'll have today at lunch, why I invest in the Martial Powers project over these other projects, because providing quadratic options to martials has a larger fan base than Spelljammer or Eberron combined. So it's just good marketing for me to invest lunches on Martial Powers as opposed to something else. Because the idea of having spell-like options for martial characters is a long-standing desire from the community, the more techie side of the role-playing community, that recognizes the disparage difference between the classes because they play often enough to see it actually happening. Casuals that play a campaign or two don't run into the problem of like fighters aren't balanced compared to wizards. Like most of them are going to pay maybe from level 3 to 6, and that might be their only experience with it ever, and they're out. they'll never have the opportunity to feel how disappointing it is to be a 17th level barbarian next to, you know, a necromancer or, you know, a sorcerer or whatever. Hey, what's up? I want to see how you do the dust layer. You know what? You're right. Careful of the smooth lines on these rocks. They have been impacted. Yeah. I'm just doing a general smoothing out. I'm going to do a texture layer over it. And you're right, though. I do need to introduce some dust into the equation. So here's my reference. And you'll see that these have that general smoothing. But then when I add in, like I'm just using a base color right now. And you can see these highlights here and these shadows here. That's where most of the texture is going to come from. I'm rambling a lot, which means that I'm not really thinking about my process as much. And I'm just kind of pushing pixels around, which is something I tend to do when I get rambly. So thanks, Karen. I appreciate you keeping me on task. I'm supposed to have a timer going. Yeah, that timer's going to pop in 2 minutes. I have a 20-minute timer here. Hold on, if I can make my button work. Work button. Yeah, I've got a timer here that helps make sure that if I dive down to a tangent, I don't stay down there. But you are appreciated. Very, very appreciated. So what we want to do is we're going to take a base. We're just going to take the base color here. I think we're going to start behind. Initially, we're just going to do a color wash like this. I'm going to take our smudge brush and work this in to the canvas. You're great, Karen. Thank you. Truly. Here, let's see. I want to take that eye. Let's grab a chunk of this. Worm. Thank you, timely timer. Karen already reminded me. Go. Stick with this. Diffuse a bit more. Let's have my reference here real quick. Actually, I'm going to fetch some of that highlight. Now I can hide the reference. same fogging effect, but with a different color, a brighter color, standing out more from the separating rocks from each other a bit better. Drop opacity just a bit. Let's get this back here. Drop the opacity on that. Not too much. Like that-ish. Like that-ish. Like that. And then we need a darker grit. Let's go down here and grab this-ish. I actually want to use a texture. But what texture do I want to use? I need some spin. Hold on. Yes. This is a fan brush here that see how that's turning. You might not. I'm not sure if the tool is picking it up, but see the further I get on its side, the more like a fan it becomes. And then as I tilt it up, and then now it's fanned out again, and I can tap in different smudges like that. It's a cool brush. It really uses the three-dimensional effect, and it's very responsive to light touches. It's an interesting tool. Go down to here. take our fractal brush, chop away at this, but just get that grit going in there. Yeah, it's doing pretty good. Thank you. I'm going to drop the opacity on this so it blends in as texture more. Drop this down a little bit further as well. Just get some of that grittiness to it. Feels good. And then I want to get some of the higher light bits. Where do my references go? Cool. Let's grab that highlight again. Let's go with that. That in like that. So we're just building little spheres basically of disruption here. And then we erase enough of it to destroy the obvious pattern, but still get the idea of motion. And then we fade it in so it doesn't stand out so harshly. So it just becomes grit. There you go. The grittening. If I really want to have fun, I can drop the highlight behind the darkness of the blurble, and then I can take an eraser here with a really low erase strength and tap at the cloud itself. Dumpa dumpa pa pa dumpa dumpa pa dumpa dumpa pa pa dumpa dumpa. There, and let's see, where is that coming from specifically? I'm hunting wabbits. Need a better line. Woof. It's Oh, see, my system locked up. I have to hit save and close it and then reopen it. Is not to lose too much of the worm through the dust, fragments, and rock. Yeah, absolutely. It's a balancing act, and we're still finding the proper balance for that. So close that out and reopen. Exploration with an A. Out the other. Drop the opacity there, and then drop the opacity there. I think that's starting to feel okay. Yeah, I think what I actually need to do is work on the rocks some more. So, rock it. Let's get back into it. Rocks. Rocks. Now let's get back into the zero of it. So now we'll be doing rocks for the rest of the session because that's what's needed right now. As the last part of this piece, finishing these rocks, which means that we'll most likely be able to start in. We'll have something new that we'll do next week. I don't know what it is that we're going to work on next. I think I have a grappling piece, a nautiloid grappling, a living ship. So I think that's what I want to illustrate next. That's in the combat section. So I'll probably finish these rocks off screen. Maybe this weekend. I tend to paint rocks like this, like when I'm listening to live streams, audio books, or whatever. When my brain is being, like, when my thoughts are being engaged, but it doesn't require any specific visual cues, I can safely dive in here and build asteroids. Text. Hey Azim, how you doing? Cool, glad to hear it, man. Burp. Here's the overall piece, and here's the full document that we're working on. If you check out the beginning of the book, we were doing diagrams and ship movement illustrations. But this is a 107-page document overall. And we've got like, all the layouts are good. We haven't dropped any of the actual images into the piece yet, but I'm pretty happy with where everything is sitting so far. Here's our exploration chapter. Exploration. So that's what we do. We build the thing in Word. We take the holes inside of the text. We then export it here into Photoshop, and then we paint. And when all the illustrations are done, we reload them into Word programs, seal it into a PDF, and then publish it on DMsGuild. And if you're actually there's a slew of links in the description down below with free previews. You can see the other works that I have done. This is probably the most polished piece, as well as the most explored physics overall. So this is a level, a proof of quality that my skill has leveled up over the past couple years in building these things. But I'm pretty happy with where the work is going overall. And being able to produce this level of work is taking considerably less time than it would have in the past. So my skills as an artist are amplifying as well by just being able to process the same quality of art at a quicker speed, which is essentially the same of being able to do better art in the same amount of time. Because at some point your style gets good enough that you don't need to spend more time on it. You need to learn how to spend less time on it so you can be more productive and get more things done. But that's a constant work in progress. Just gonna hem and haw these things a bit, get the shape rough but not jagged. The jagged bits, so like you were saying, Karen, these wouldn't be smooth because of all the impact that's happening, but they wouldn't necessarily be jagged either. So I need to be mindful of how hewn, how rough hewn the rocks are overall. And I also need to be mindful of any remnants like this. Like this is an artifact at this point. An artifact is a term in digital painting where you can see what type of brush was being used to create the piece, but the texture created by that brush isn't complementary to the materials or the composition of the piece. Like these little bands here are conveying some sort of information about the piece that doesn't actually exist. But like down here, that pattern is broken up enough that it just looks like grit that's being propelled. But over here, this propulsion at this angle doesn't make any sense. So it's a contradiction. It's a contradiction. It's bad form. And so what I need to do then is jump in here real quick and chop it up and go hunting for artifacts for a hot second. And only just breaking them up a little is all you really need to do. Just you need to make the pattern disappear so it's not obvious, but enough of the pattern needs to remain so it conveys the sense of motion that you actually want it to do. Fun trick. There's my 20-minute timer. What time is it? It's 7:30. Is that right? Okay, so we still got 20 minutes today. That's cool. So I do this book art Monday through Friday in the mornings like this. I do maps for the Eberron adventure that we'll be publishing on Mondays and Thursday nights. Saturday morning, I have a stream where I do commissions from other RPG creators that need a custom piece of art they can't get anywhere else, so they turn to me, and I produce it on stream because that's fun, and you get to promote. They get promotion for free, basically, which will eventually actually mean something as I continue to accumulate and grow. I'll be able to build book covers as part of a hype project for creators. Like here's the work, here's the cost of production for me to be able to create the piece. But since I have in the future an audience of 200,000, then you're going to pay a premium for the production time being on camera and me talking about how your product is inspiring ideas that I'm going to spontaneously have with you during the course of creating the art that you commission me. So you'd effectively be hiring me to both create the art and think about all the ideas that the thing you hired me to paint is inspiring in me, which is what the book cover that I work on Saturday has certainly done as well. So even that's proof of concept. But if I don't have a current commission, I do personal projects, which will probably be like ship designs or maps or whatever it is that we got going on. I'm gonna tap at this a little bit more before I let it go. Text. Oh, right on. Thanks, Azion. Well, the Martial Powers project, we're going to work on that at lunch today in about, probably like in about 5 hours or so. Typically, my timing is always a little fudgy, but it's 7:30 here in Seattle, and my intention, I don't have, my lunch isn't booked today, so my intention is to jump back on and work on more Martial Powers. And since we finished the fighter on Tuesday, and I have an open spot, then we can go through the monk and we can start assigning all the bonus powers that the monk gets. So, which the Martial Powers project is the color mana system for martial characters, so that fighters and other martial type characters have there's 140 different powers they can pick from. They get a kit of 10 for free as a subclass feature. And then on top of that, there's the 16 powers that you as a player can choose for your character. And so we've been rebuilding all the subclasses using the power system, and we finished all of them except for the monk. We need to build a bonus power list. When we started with the monk, that was the first one we worked on, and so tech has advanced since last visiting the monk a couple months ago. So now that we've gone through all the other classes, I want to go back to the monk and update how tech works to make sure that the monk is still bleeding edge game design in the world of martial powers, as well as pick out the 10 free powers that the bonus powers that they get as they level up as a monk. So that's how I'll be spending this Friday, today. I'll also be back on Tuesday like usual for Martial Powers, do that. My Thursday lunch is actually free this week, next week. Normally it's not. So this upcoming week, I'll have my Thursday free, which I can also Martial Powers with. My Monday this week is going to be, I've got things I have to do on Monday this week. So I won't be doing the Eldraine monster conversion from the D&D Beyond project, which I normally do on Mondays. But that's more of a review of my current color philosophies in D&D to make sure that I'm going to get rid of this brush before it causes me trouble. When we go into 2024 and they offer us the new mechanics for the new options for 5e, I have to rebuild the color mana books because it'll no longer be compliant with the current version of D&D. So that means I need to update it, which is a great excuse for me to integrate Strixhaven and Theros into the core mechanics and just rebuild and integrate the expanded color mana list that I posted as a pay what you want. I can integrate that actually into and replace the current spell lists that are in the core mechanics, the Knights and Trickster books, to make sure that that's compliant with the most current tech. And it's just going to be a general glow up as well. It'll be my back end 2024 effort to rebuild all those books, clean up the layouts, clean up the language where I know we've made improvements to rules, and redo the artwork so that it fits appropriately in both style. And I've leveled up considerably since creating those books, but my work is just better. So it's an opportunity for me to update those books and make them current. And so all the books that I have done, the Color Mana project is the one that I'm most interested in keeping current and updating, because I know it's just a matter of time before Wizards plays in the MTG space some more. So if I keep building out tools and mechanics to use color mana in MTG, it's just a matter of time before more people, it's almost a gold bestseller, which is less than 2% of the books that are actually on the DMsGuild at all. So there's a growing audience that is interested in color mana, and so far I'm basically the leading authority on the subject because I'm the only one that's really invested absurd amounts of time and published to a semi-professional level what those ideas are. And I still use, in my 19th level Eberron campaign currently, we use color mana. I love Eberron with color mana. I love all campaigns with color mana because color is so much more expressive, and provides literal visual information in comparison to like how do you tell a necromancy spell from, like, say, a conjuration spell, right? Like, what's the visual language that Wizards has established that when you see it happening, you know, oh, that's a necromancy spell. It's a rhetorical question. The answer is there's nothing there. That's never been something that Wizards has really had to think about, but yet they have both the MTG and the D&D IPs and have had them for decades, and still have not yet introduced color as just a basic means of identifying different effects that you're dealing with in your adventuring day. Like, it just adds so much to the exploration pillar of play to be able to just talk about what the magic looks like and to have that actually mean something. Yeah, the blue radiance that's surrounding that cleric, you're pretty certain it's going to take a lot of effort for you to be able to punch through that shield. And you generally have a decent idea of knowing what we're talking about here. So, anyway, I'm punching up again. I don't need to do that today. But it's exciting. It's really, really exciting. And it's funny when you create something that's actually worth a damn. And, like, why didn't someone else create this first? It's because it was destined to be you, because you're the guy. No one knows why the hero gets chosen other than the casting director. So, I want to keep up on that one. Anyway, I'm rambling because I'm excited about it. Having all 13 classes use the same color mana system together to express character options is just, it's the dream. It's what really will actually fuse color magic into D&D characters overall by creating that quadratic option for the martial characters across the different tiers of play, so that they remain relevant at high levels, just like a wizard or a cleric has relevance at high levels because of what they're capable of doing for the team. And although you get to it in a different way, the martial power system allows you that same amount of fuckery, of shenanigans as a player. Anyway, rambling on about it because I'm excited I get to do that today. It's going to be a great lunch. I'm really looking forward to diving into Monk today. It's going to be fun. And once we get there, then we get to focus on the magic paradigms of, like, actually integrating color into the characters, as well as the 4 elements, integrating that system in as an alternate. There's just generic mana, and then there's the 5 color mana paradigm, and then there's the 4 elements paradigm, and both of those exist as basically separate clip-on systems. The default for the martial power system is just, generic spell points. But having the ability to create magic paradigms with this color, with this devotion system, allows us to create more and more narrative around the magic that is inside of the game. And that narrative aspect is just something that doesn't really exist. So that too, I'm excited about, having a basically clip-on point-and-click system that you can, like, mind, body, and spirit. You can have a triad magic paradigm system instead of the 5 colors or the 4 elements. You can have the 3 aspects of reality. You can have just 2, like the duality of light and darkness, good and evil, law and chaos. You can break things like you can have the like more than 5. Like 6 and more starts to get kind of clumsy because you're breaking up your pool so much between different options that it basically becomes non-options, because it spreads you so thin that you need to switch out of having 8 different buckets into just having one specific bucket, universal spell points, but then switch to narrative. Like if I'm going to have like a 9-point, like if I'm going to have an alignment grid where there's law, chaos, neutral, good and evil, and then also neutral, So you've got this matrix of 9 alignments, and you were to create a magic system based on the alignments, then that would be 9 different buckets that your spell points could be dropped into, and that becomes a bit cumbersome to be able to express mechanically in the game. So typically, like, capping at 5 different aspects of magic to devote your mana to is about as far as you really want to go. At least that's how I'm finding. So, I mean, you know, opinions may vary. May vary. Something's wrong here. Hold on. Oh, that's where that's coming from. Unintended consequence. There. Better. About time for us to rough up the texture. Is this, how are we sitting here? I'll take a chunk of these. Let's look at this, just distorting them a little bit. Let me go for warp. Eyes. That feels pretty good. Also feels pretty good. Cool. Okay, great. So let's texture these things and get donezo. Bug. So now we'll take the. Let's grab a reference here real quick. Super dark, super light. Let's go in and grab an appropriate brush for the efforts. We want to use our chisels and blades. So let me go find my mountain chisel and my mountain razor. Not the right one. Where are you at, buddy? Come hither. Mountain chisel. And where's my blade? Razor. I want my mountain razor for... So here's my mountain chisel. And here's my mountain razor. And I need to go into brush settings and remove spacing on the razor so that when I smudge with it, yeah, it's a clean smudge. There. So let's get after it. Let's see, we're looking for highlights. Thanks for the compliments, Azium. It's really appreciated. I don't hear a lot from people that have experienced the stuff that I build, so it's always really, really cool to run across people, you know, out in the wild that have had a chance to play with my stuff and actually enjoy it. That's inspiring. Thank you. So we're going to take this, and we're just going to pepper in some texture. See how easy it is to build texture like that? And then we take this blade here, and we're going to ramp it up to like around a 90% strength. So I can then take it and just scuff it up a little bit. See, that's how easy it is to create that texture. Super fucking easy to create texture. But I need to have this, I need to have the lining, like I want to have the central highlighting there, right? Breaking away from the surrounding, so I can work the rough edges into it. Yeah, like that. See, very, very easy to do this. And then I can go over it with the highlight layer here and do the same and be able to basically chunk these things into position. Like that. And then I can take the chisel brush as an eraser at 20% opacity and just chop. Just tap at the edges a little bit to work the highlights into the canvas. And there you go. Decent little piece of rock, right? It's super easy to do. Super easy to do. I love it. But that's basically the same sort of texturing process, but these have been out and about longer. So there's still like some pockmarking going on, but like the facing, like there's from the here, I'll just grab it real quick. It'll be easier to explain it just by pointing it out real fast, and we'll dive back into this. But hold on real quick here. Mama Hunt. There we go. Here's the map that we have. It's a 50-foot scale map, so each square is 50 feet. For you to chase sharks inside of here, the Topola who's in charge of this area. It's like if you can get rid of the space sharks, I'll give you all the information that you need for your MacGuffin. And so you go in here on a 20-foot skiff with a gun and start flying between asteroids to shoot at sharks, and when you clear them out, then you get your reward. But the lighting that I used is using Topola's tower here at position 1 as the source of light in the region. So all the highlighting and shadows reflecting that she has light source, like lanterns and stuff on her tower. So that light source is appropriate, if not perhaps exaggerated. But the larger point that I'm trying to make is that the rocks facing towards Topola tend to have smoother facing, as opposed to the spots away from Topola tend to have rougher edges. So I was making some cosmetic design decisions around that. And so when we're working on this piece down here, we're using basically the ship as our central source of light. Subtly, we're not specifically calling it out, but the highlights that we're using on these rocks will be pointing towards the moth, or the damselfly that we have flying away from this space worm. So that light source is going to be a subtle nod of importance, because all the lighting is going to face in that direction. So that's just a subtle compositional thing that you can do to manipulate your audience's eye into being directed in where you want it to go. So we do shadow around the edges in general, and then we do our spotlights leaning towards the ship. That's the general theme that we're going with. And I can use my eraser here to hack away at the edges a little bit, to smooth it in. And then I can grab my chisel and just shuffle it up a little bit, and then bam. Super fucking easy to do that. And then sticking with our tenets that we just described, we decide where our highlights are at and scuff them in, and then rough up the area with a razor. And erase it in. Almond Raw! Wow. Oof, look at all those rough edges that I ended up creating. That's too rough. So what I'll have to do is, after I finish these highlights, I'll go in and I'll do a cleanup layer. I'll do I'll re-edge all of these so they integrate more properly. But right now, all I have to worry about is highlights. And I know my timer popped, so I'm like, I've only got a few minutes left today, this morning anyway. But I'll be back in about 5 hours, 4.5, 5 hours ish. Probably by 1 o'clock. Let's just say by 1 o'clock in Seattle, 5 hours from now, I'll be back working on monks for the Martial Powers project. But again, just pull at these things just to make that roughage. It takes so little effort, but the brushes do most of the work for me. But I had to do a shitload of work to be able to recognize what these brushes need to be for me to create that work in the first place. So the tools that the custom brushes that I use and I build are serving specific purposes in my workflow, which is what brushes are designed to do. Like some people, like new artists, think that the strength of the piece comes from the brushes that are used, but they're trying to collapse time frames and get shortcuts, where the people that design the brushes want to slow down and take more time to develop the skills needed that will actually make use of those brushes in the first place. So it's a difference in philosophy between collectors and producers. And it's not me snubbing anyone at all. It's just you need, and I talk about this occasionally, you need to learn to control the reward systems inside your body, like what feeds you dopamine. Like when I create like this rock that we created here, this rock that gave me a kick of dopamine when I did that, because I recognized the results were what I had intended for. So that I have a feedback loop I've already built inside of myself over the past 20 some odd years, that when I succeed at depicting something, I feel pride. That is the process of art in general. That feeling proud of the work that you do, and that pride is translated into serotonin and dopamine in your body's system. So you're being chemically rewarded for physical effort and focused concentration of effort. And social media actively destroys that feedback loop and replaces it with like buttons, where likes become your dopamine kick. And so whatever it takes for you to get more likes is what you're being trained to produce, which inevitably leads everybody to porn. So I'm not interested in doing cheesecake artwork, but there's plenty of people creating waifu art that get $20,000 a month to make some smut. That's the only piece of sex industry where men can get paid as much as women, is in producing images of women. But that's not. I decided a long time ago that's not for me. So that cut off that point of access. But if all you're doing is chasing likes, it inevitably leads you. You get more likes for cheesecake, so it inevitably leads you to cheesecake. If all your art is designed to do is to get you those fleeting likes, which is roundabout way me saying that if you're chasing likes, you're essentially training yourself to whore yourself out to your audience, as opposed to creating works like the works that I'm producing here. It's the status, the chemicals I'm getting is from the production of it. Me sharing the work doesn't provide nearly the dopamine kick that I got from producing it. When I publish things online, for me, it's more marketing. Come check out what I'm doing here. You might think it's cool, as opposed to praise me for this piece that I've created. I don't need people's praise. I get paid to make people's art, and like $500 for a painting is pretty good praise. I'm content with that. So I have to be able to create my own satisfaction from the work that I produce to be able to maintain the workload that I do of how much work needs to be produced for each piece, like for this book specifically. So, but that's, I'm kind of rambling. But if you aren't actively thinking about, like if you've never thought about that stuff, It's still happening. You just don't know how it's happening to you. You aren't analyzing that. It's taking advantage of your ignorance and your inability to spot it so far. It hides inside of your space and teaches you the things that the algorithms want you to learn to be better producers for it. But if you take an active role in what you're feeding your pleasure centers and your reward feedback loop, you start to set terms for what things will you be rewarded for. If that makes any sense. There. But I am just about done for now. The muse won't let me go. She doesn't let me. She generally won't let me go if I start talking about serotonin and dopamine and stuff, because there's a lot of people out there that are falling into click addictions that aren't really aware that it's happening. It's just happening by default because of the tools that they interact with. That's where they push you to. So I like to point it out when I can that these are things. It's just like your laugh. Most people don't think about their laugh, but you can actively constrict your throat or change your breathing pattern while you're laughing, and that causes your laugh to change. And if you've never thought about how do you laugh, pay attention to how much you listen to somebody that has a horrible laugh. Like, God, please go away. Your laugh is repulsing. And if you aren't thinking about what your laugh sounds like, you may have a laugh that's repulsing to people. But if you never think about it, you don't know. But you can sculpt your reward feedback chemical loop inside your body just as easily as you can control what your laugh sounds like. And you should. These are things you should be thinking about. And I don't should people a lot, but this is something I will should people on. You should be thinking about how you present yourself, about what you're saying, about your stance, about how you prioritize things. These are all subtle indications of how you treat yourself on top of how you treat others. So it's important. And the more you actively live your life and observe the things that you do, the more you can make an active choice and be a part of the life that you're living. Instead of always having things happening to you, you can see how things are happening and be a guiding decision in that process, which is empowerment. And you're not asking somebody or demanding that empowerment from anybody. You're claiming it for yourself by the way that you hold yourself and the actions that you choose to take regarding the reality around you. You don't have to demand respect from anybody. You can create respect for yourself, and that teaches other people how they are to engage and interact with you, which, if it's respect first, you don't have to worry about being disrespected. And then you can get off your high horse in your crusade about social media and blah, blah, blah. You can just be simple and be respectful and help your environment and not have to worry about what other people are doing because you're covering your own shit. Anyway, that's coming along nicely, so I am very, very happy with where we are. This is going to end up looking really fucking cool when it's done. And we'll be able to pack in some shadow in here into this space. We have more of a light haze going on with the grit over here, but going across the worm's body helps darken it, and then we'll get really dark over here to help frame the environment overall, going from light to dark. So, as we do. Anyway, that's it for now, guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out, and thanks for the love. We'll be back in about 5 hours to do some monk translation for the martial power system. I'll be back tomorrow morning in about 25 hours to work on the book cover commission. I'll be back Monday morning to do more Spelljammer stuff, and we'll probably be working on a different. I might work on this, but it might be a different piece. I'm not sure where we're at. Depends on where we get to. But yeah, so there's that. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers. So anyone that's swinging through, please do like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, so I can continue growing the channel. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Thanks a lot.